So, what happens when a country's economy is in a free fall? Most companies would just try to hang on for dear life. But what if a crisis like that wasn't a death sentence, but a source of incredible power? Today, we're diving into the story of Koç Holding, a Turkish giant that came up with this wild strategy to not just survive a currency collapse, but to actually use it to their advantage. I mean, think about it. How do you possibly win when your own country's currency is tanking? It sounds completely backward, right? Normally that means chaos, loss, and disaster. But for Koch Holding, it somehow became a strategic weapon. Let's dig into how on earth they pulled that off. And when we say storm, we are not kidding. Just look at this number. The Turkish lira absolutely plummeted, at one point hitting around 34 to a single US dollar. Imagine if the money in your wallet became worth so much less so quickly. It creates this incredibly intense, high-stakes environment for any business trying to operate. So, who's the main character in this whole drama? Meet Koç Holding. You can basically think of them as the industrial backbone of Turkey. They're this massive conglomerate, and for what we're talking about today, they pretty much run the nation's entire auto industry. Okay, so how did they actually navigate this financial hurricane? Well, they built something we can call an export fortress. It sounds cool, right? But let's actually break down what that really means and how it works. The scale of this thing is just mind-blowing. Coach's auto divisions ship out over $15 billion worth of vehicles every single year. And get this, that's 10% of all of Turkey's exports combined. 10%. Their two big players, Ford Otosan and Tofaş, export something like 80% of everything they build. So you see, they're not just a Turkish car company anymore. They're basically a European manufacturing powerhouse that just happens to be located in Turkey. And this, right here, is where that collapsing lira stops being a problem and starts becoming a secret weapon. This is where Koç Holding figured out how to flip a national crisis into a massive global opportunity. Okay, so here's the core of the strategy. A weak lira is a classic double-edged sword. On one side, the awesome benefit. It makes their Turkish-made cars incredibly cheap and competitive for anyone in Europe buying with strong euros. That's a huge win. But on the other side, there's the risk. All the imported parts they need to actually build those cars, they get way, way more expensive. So, presented with that choice, which side of the bet did they take? Well, the numbers don't lie. A jaw-dropping 81% of their production is shipped straight out of the country. This wasn't some timid little test. They looked at the board and decided that the benefit of super cheap exports completely crushed the risk of pricier parts. They went all in. And they didn't just go all in with their existing chips. They threw a whole lot more on the table. We're talking about a massive €2 billion investment to double down on this export-first strategy. And it's all aimed at building the next generation of electric vehicles for, you guessed it, the European market. This is not a short-term play. This is a long-term, company-defining commitment. But here's the thing. Every fortress, no matter how strong, has a few potential weak spots. And when you bet the entire house on a single strategy, you, by definition, expose yourself to a very unique and very serious set of risks. This quote just nails the bizarre reality the company found itself in. While they were breaking export records and winning big overseas, their own home market was completely imploding. We were talking about domestic car sales getting literally cut in half. It's like they were winning a war abroad, but the very ground underneath their feet was crumbling. And these numbers, they tell a tale of two completely different worlds. On one hand, you have Ford Otosan's export volumes growing at a really healthy pace. But on the other, the domestic Turkish market has just cratered. And that is the core risk here. They've almost become a foreign company operating on Turkish soil, almost totally disconnected from the economic health of their own people. And even with all its success, this strategy is getting squeezed from all sides. Their profit margins are already pretty thin. Costs are shooting up at home because of inflation. Their biggest customer, the European Union, could slap new tariffs on them at any moment. And let's not even get started on all the geopolitical uncertainty in the region. The fortress is strong, for sure, but the world outside is getting pretty stormy. Which brings us to this critical moment, this inflection point. That massive €2 billion investment we talked about, it's not just a number on a spreadsheet. It represents a fundamental strategic choice, a fork in the road for the entire future of the company. So the leadership at Koç Holding has to make a call, a really big one. Where does this next huge chunk of capital go? This is the decision that is going to define their path for the next decade, maybe more. And they really have two very clear, very different paths in front of them. Path one, they can double down, just floor it. Keep accelerating exports, build more capacity, and squeeze every last drop of advantage out of that weak lira. The huge risk there? They become a hostage to the ups and downs of the European market. Path two, they pivot. They use that money to rebuild at home, maybe kickstart a whole new domestic electric vehicle market. The risk there? They'd be walking away from the very strategy that's making them so much money right now.
So now I'm going to turn it over to you. Imagine you're sitting in that boardroom. The decision is on the table. Do you reinforce the fortress and bet it all on exports? Or do you start building a new foundation back at home? It's a massive, high-stakes decision, and there is absolutely no easy answer. What would you do?